Hello and welcome to this private fund manager training course called PFM Beyond the Basics, where we will be looking at all sorts of things from the private fund manager software that go a bit beyond the things that people do on a day-to-day basis and tend to be quite comfortable and competent with. Everything I cover has a section in the printed notes, so please be sure to print those if you haven't already. If you have, fabulous. Do follow the session using the notes and watching the screen. As this is a pre-recorded session, if you have any queries, please do drop me an email and I'm happy to give you a call back or to talk through any of the issues or any of the queries you might have. So let's go straight in then to the Private Funds Manager software and start running through our session. So the first section I'm going to talk about is the area of accounts maintenance, the very first tab on the Private Fund Manager. As you can see, I've clicked it in the top left hand corner, and some of the things that we can do with shortcodes, ways to set them up, etc. As you know, when you set up these accounts, you're able to pick any sort of shortcode that you fancy. So you might have prefixes, as this list has. You might have numbers. It's whatever works for you as a way to enter information and call up reports. Entering information, if you do very much of it manually, it's ideal if we can easily locate the codes that we want. So keeping them logical, using letters and words instead of numbers might be an advantage. I'm just going to create a new one, which is a trip to Paris, I'm going to say. And so all I need to do is type in the name of the code, as I'm sure you know. I like to put the year on if it's a trip or an account that we use on an ongoing basis. It's good to break down into different accounts for different financial years. Not always the case, obviously. If you have charity accounts, etc., then we might just have one generic code that doesn't change from year to year. And so we can put in, as you know, a short code and a full name. The full name can be changed at any time. The short code is set in stone once you've started processing to it. First thing I wanted to talk about was the different types of tracking. So tracking required here is the fourth box down. As you can see, we've got 4 options. Most people use either lump sum or individual. So lump sum means that we really don't need any detail of who has paid us the various lumps of money. We just want money in, money out. By class, very rarely used, is if you wanted to keep a ready reckoner or a total for each class. So it could be if you were doing some kind of fundraising competition, you might use that. By individual, of course, is where we want to keep a record of which pupils have paid into a given account. And then the bottom option is if we want to keep a record of who's paid, but we also want to reclaim gift aid. So we can set it up in either of these 4 options. As I say, most people use lump sum or individual. And I just wanted to mention a question that comes up frequently is, what if I've set it up by individual, but actually I have some money that's come in that is not specific to one student? So let me just finish setting this account up. It's the Paris trip. I put over on the right hand side here under contribution how much each person pays. And then I choose from the entire student database. I'm going to say that this is a trip just for year 11s. So I'm going to pick just year 11s from this pull down list. And then I can pick the individuals who are going on the Paris trip. Or if it were a whole year group, I could just use the double right facing arrow button on the right. If not, I'm just going through and double clicking. If you use an online payment system and you put all of your transactions, be they cards or cash or checks, through your online payment system, you don't have to go through this process of picking the students. You only do this if you are using manual entry of cash and checks. Or if people aren't paying, or that we need to know who hasn't paid at all, then the only way to do that would be to allocate the students in this way. The way I got here was simply to go into account maintenance, click on the grey student button, and it gives me my list. On the left hand side it's got the entire school, and over on the right hand side here I can get it just to show my year 11s, and it shows the people who are going on this particular trip or linked to the account. So as I say, what if we have the Paris trip but we've got a donation of £200, maybe from a previous year's trip, or maybe from the travel company, who knows what it is. We've done some fundraising, we'll say, and we need to record some money into the account but not allocating it to one or other of the children. So the way we do this then is we make sure that we have a responsible person. That might be a real person that we allocate these random money received to, or it might be that we create a responsible person called something like other income, or it could be a person called donations. Whatever makes sense to you, we put it in as a responsible person. It's not a person, it's a way of allocating money. Then I can go across to my normal place where I enter information. The banking screen, as you know, is where cash and cheques goes in. Either you manually enter this or you have it automatically appear when you link with your online payment system. If you do enter things manually, and to be honest, if it were a donation you would be, wouldn't you, entering this manually? It's not going through an online payment system. We call up the account in question. Mine was Paris. We go across, click in the cash column, and the usual list of students comes up, but it's none of those I want. What I need to do instead is I want to call up a responsible person. So I go into my usual area, but instead of picking one of the students, I click on this tab at the top left that says responsible persons. My list comes up, including the one I had called donations, and I'm going to say we've received £500. Under check number, I might actually put who the donation is from, so J.E. Smith & Co. donation. Just so I've got a reference, some information in there. Date, click on finished, and now my information comes up at the top. I can tweak the notes if I want it to say something else, so I might just take off that bit off the end. And now then, when I look at the Paris trip, the £500 is allocated to the trip, but not against any individual pupil. I'm going to look at reports in just a minute, but when I look into a summary of the account, as you can see, it just puts it in as a generic donation. So that's quite handy if you have by individual accounts but you want to record some of your money not specifically allocated to students. What about if you want to do it the other way round? So you've set up an account as a lump sum, but you really now want to start allocating money to this art shop to individual pupils. There's not really an easy way around that. What I would do is set up another shortcode. So I'm going to go for new shortcode at the bottom corner. I'll call it a art shop again, but I have to change it in some way. I might put a 2 on the end, or I might put individual on the end of my code. Has to be slightly different. So art shop recorded by individual. This time I would change the tracking to by individual, and again, if I don't have an online payment system, I'd have to manually choose my pupils. So I'm going to have some year 7s this time. I'll change on the right side so I can see them as they appear. So I'm picking various children from my list. And so I've set this up then as a by individual account. However, I'm presuming there's some money in the lump sum version of this account. Let's just have a little look at it. Art shop Actually there's not, but let's pretend there is. Let's pretend there's this £3,371. Then we would obviously need to transfer the money using the transfers option so that it comes out of the previous art shop account and the money goes into the new account. Now, if you needed to actually take that lump, let's say it's £1,000, and allocate it to individual pupils, we'd have to do that in a slightly different way to short code transfers, but I'm going to show that later on in the session. So it's easier if you've set an individual account up and you want to record some of the money as lump sum than it is to do it the other way around, but both are achievable. Carrying on with our accounts area, section C in your notes of part 1, what sometimes happens is if you are using the system, a PFM system, to tell you who has and hasn't paid for something, then when we set up the account, we put that in as a contribution over here on the right, so it's £10 for the art shop. What often happens is we either don't know at the time of setting up the account what it should be, or that amount changes. And so we need to be able to change the contribution or the cost of a given trip after we've started receiving money. So let me look at Alton Towers, see what we've got going on with this one. I click on the grey student button. We've got that set up as nothing. Let's just see if we've got any. Okay, so this particular workshop is set up as £20. What happens if that actually has got to be £22? Well, logically, you'd think you change it here to £22, but all that does is from this point onwards, if we add any new students to the account, it will default to 22. It does not change any of them already on here. So to do so, it's slightly odd, but we have to go to the left-hand side of the screen and pick one of the students who have already paid some money into this account. Up at the top, as you can see, the contribution for this person shows as £20 contribution at the top, and it shows that they've paid £20. And so in order to make a change to the artist workshop from 20 to 22, we pick one person, we change theirs, we click anywhere else on the page and it says, would you like everyone updated from 20 to 22? And we say yes. So as you can see there, it's slightly counterintuitive how we go about that business. We don't just change it in a contribution box, that's only from this point forward. To change retrospectively, we have to pick our student and change the contribution of one, click away, and it'll ask if we want to change the contribution of all. So that's changing costs. Another thing I wanted to point out on the accounts maintenance screen is this bit in the bottom left-hand corner, which is talking about cost codes. So terminology is kind of funny between systems, but in our system, a cost code is a grouping code. It's a kind of top-level header code. Short codes are each and every individual account. Cost codes are the group headings. So at the moment, whenever I run a report, as you can see, I get a huge old list of information. For some schools that can be 4 or 5 pages long. It's a very big list, and actually there's such a quantity of codes that sometimes it's difficult to pick out, summary information. So the point of these cost codes is to do just that. It is to summarise when you've got lots of individual accounts. So, for example, let's have a look. We've got a whole load of T accounts here, which I'm guessing are all trips. So I might choose to add a cost or a grouping code called trips. I click on add a cost code and I'm going to put in the heading of trips. So I've allocated this first trip to that subheading. I then have to go through each of them in turn, allocating each of my individual accounts to a group heading. So I know this is slightly tedious, but once it's done, the reports that we can produce will be much more summarised and perhaps therefore much more straightforward to work out what they're saying. So on I go through all my T's, allocating them to trips, and I'll carry on doing that for 1 sec. So I haven't done all of those because I don't want to take up all my time doing so. But I'm going to allocate all the T's to trips, and then I've got A at the top. I'm not entirely sure what the A refers to. Maybe this is some kind of general, so I might allocate those to a new cost code. So I'll click on add a cost code and I'll put general, and then I'll go through all the A's in turn, allocating them using the pull down arrow to this group heading, and so on and so forth. So we will end up with perhaps only 6 or 7 summary accounts which summarise, lump together everything from the various other accounts on the system. What else have I got on here? So I've got a few of those. And then I've got a whole load, as you can see, which start with SCH, which I'm guessing we're going to call school. And I will do exactly the same process, allocating in turn each of the shortcodes that I want to be fed into a group heading. This doesn't affect any of the reports you'll be used to running. All it's going to do is add some additional reports for us that will summarise the information. And the report in question then, and it's not going to be a complete report, so bear with me, but on screen inquiries, right in the middle of the top row, there's a button called Income and Expenditure by Cost Code being by summary accounts. When I create this one then, so I've got a heading here called General, and it's showing me a total in, out and closing balance of all of the individual accounts that I have previously allocated to it. Same with school, same down a bit further with trips. There he is. We've got summary accounts, which now the individual accounts that I did put in that group have disappeared, and if I were to go through all of the accounts individually, I would end up with a very small list that just had general, it had school, I think was my second one, it had trips, and whatever else makes sense to you. So certainly for people like governors, they often don't want to see every single trip ins and outs. They just want some kind of a summary. Do that then using this cost code option. If you decide that actually science is on there and we don't really want science, all you need to do is remove science from any accounts that have got it allocated, and when no one has it allocated, it will disappear. If you're not sure what you've done, there's this button called current cost codes, and as you can see, it shows a short code and then it tells us which heading, which group heading we've allocated things to in column 2. So that might be something that's worth looking at for producing the reports that you're interested in. When we have all these different accounts, we may get to a point where actually we don't need all of them, as you probably will know. If you have used an account, i.e. you have posted transactions to it, you can't delete an account until year end. I'm just going to go back to my Paris one and delete my single transaction off here. So Paris, in my example, is one I've created. There's now no transactions against it. And so actually, because of that, I could get rid of this account straight away. However, other accounts that have had postings against them, we cannot delete till year end. So for example, the new art shop I created, the second one down, can be deleted because it's zeros across the board. But the one at the top, the art shop fund, even though it's showing a balance of 0, I won't be able to delete it till after year end because it's had transactions. That's purely an audit requirement. So let me show you what we do with the one that we don't want to use anymore, but it can't go for the time being, which is our art shop fund. The only thing we can do with this is to change the full name to make it something obvious that this is a finished account and to stop you from accidentally posting to it again. So I simply use 4 asterisks or 5 asterisks in the word closed. It means when I'm doing data entry, for example, it's instantly obvious if I pick that account that this is a closed account. And that should be enough, I'm hoping, to warn me not to post to it again. So on account maintenance, all you can do is pick the account and change the full name by clicking at the front of the list, asterisk, and the word closed. Doesn't get rid of them because we can't do that till year end, but it kind of puts up a flag that this should not be used again. If it has some money in the account, so if there's £99.20 that's left in the business fund, we would then want to get rid of that money, i.e. transfer it somewhere else, and we would do that through the transfers option, and we would say take the money out of the business fund, put it into wherever you have a kind of centralized account. And some people have something like a trip savings account. Any money they make on some trips, it's posted in there and often balanced out the money they lose on other trips. Or it might go into your school funds, it might go into a resources account, whatever makes sense to you. Some kind of narrative such as closed account, and then the amount of money you want to post out of one account and into another transfer. So if you need to close accounts during the financial year and they've been used, all you can do is transfer their balances out and mark them as closed. If, on the other hand, you have accounts that you've just accidentally set up or you've not put any money against them, then we can delete them at any point using the period end and delete option. This is section F in part 1 in your notes, and it says, do you want to carry on to look at delete? Yep. And all your accounts appear down the left hand side. The one I created have not used, I can click on. I click on delete button at the bottom and I say yes, and that account now is permanently deleted. The business fund, on the other hand, which is one I have used during the year, if I click on delete for him, as you see, it's telling me it's got money in it, it's been used during the year, so we don't get to delete that one. So all the way through it's giving me a little warning to say money here, and so I would choose not to delete anything with money in. So that's various things about accounts that are quite useful to know about. Let's move swiftly on because we've got an awful lot to cover to transaction entry. You'll be familiar with the transactions you do every day, so either cash and cheques manually, or you might be linking in from an online payment system. If you are, you'll be familiar with the Internet Receipts tab. I'm not going to go through these basic things that people do on a day-to-day basis, nor am I going to go through how to process payments, because these are the things we have to do on a normal way. What I'd like to do is look at some of the transactions that are less usual, more infrequent, and therefore tend to be just a little bit more difficult to remember or to work out where they are because we just don't do them enough. So section 2 of your notes, I'm working through some of the more unusual transactions. So the first thing is bank interest and bank charges. Ideally, you'll have an account in account maintenance for bank interest and bank charges if this is something that comes up for you. And in order to process this information then, this is something that appears on your bank statement, and probably the first you know of it is you see it on a bank statement when you're doing a reconciliation. Because it's not a receipt that we have to pay in or a payment that we write a cheque for, we use the option here for a direct posting. It means it's just happened and we're recording it onto the system. So transaction entry and direct posting. There are then 2 sub-levels, so on the 3rd row down we get to choose between receipts and payment, and I hope you can see there, whichever one I click, they are absolutely identical. It's so easy to put your thing in the wrong place, so be really careful. The grey one is the one we're using. So if we have received some money and it's just appeared on our bank statement, we haven't paid it in, it's just appeared, then we do that as a direct posting. And I exclude from this online payments because that's handled in a different way. So bank interest is an obvious one. So we go into direct postings receipt and we call up the account for bank interest. I'm not entirely sure what that is on this set of data. What have we got? So we've got bank adjustment. It might be that one, or it might be some kind of a no. So we're going to say it's bank adjustment. You probably have got a bank interest button. How much have you received? I'm going to say £2.15 has been received. Now it's asking you for the account. Which bank account has this money gone into? It's looking for the 3-character or up to 3-character code. If you really don't know what that is off the top of your head, put in an X, click onto date, and it says to me, you don't have an X, please select a proper one. I click on select, and then I get to pick the correct bank account. If you know that account, just type it in. Obviously the date, and then some sort of notes. And this is a bit of a weird thing in that it doesn't flash to show you where the cursor is, but it is there in notes. So I'm just going to type in interest 1st to the 10th of the 10th, 19. So direct postings is where we put bank interest in, we click save. It's also got an option for payments, so that's also where we would put bank charges on. So if a parent has bounced a cheque on you, you might get charged £4, whatever it is these days, for that. So we make sure we've clicked on payments as a subset of direct postings. Put the amount in, the bank account, if you can't remember it, put an X, the date, and then we can put bounce check charge. Click on save. And this is also in direct posting payments where you would put on things like parent pay fees. So if you use an online payment provider who deducts their fees at source, so they actually just pay you a net amount, you might choose to put your fees in against a parent pay account. So they might have charged you £65.12 this fortnight. We want to select the correct bank account, which is our parent pay bank account, and then we can just put fees and then maybe the date range. So the direct postings area are for things that are just kind of taken. There's not a transaction that you do. You don't write a cheque. You don't fill in a pay-in slip. They're just things that tend to appear on your bank statement or are taken directly before the money even gets to you. Okay, moving on with some other types of kind of fairly unusual transactions. Another one that comes up frequently is when a cheque is bounced. So a parent pays you a cheque, but that cheque bounces. This is processed on PFM under the heading of transaction entry receipts, which sounds a bit bizarre because it's not money in, it's the opposite to that. But we go transaction entry receipts because that's what it originally was. And we then have a option here, as you can see, the fourth one across, and it's returned cheques. I think we should be upfront and call it bounce cheques, but we're using the nice word of return cheques. Cheques that have been returned to you from the bank because they've not been honoured. So transaction entry receipts and then return cheques. And essentially we just select the entry as it originally was put in. So if it's a bounce cheque for the Alton Towers trip, I choose Alton Towers. I click on all to get a full list of pupils. And then I put in the amount box as a positive the amount that the cheque was originally for, cheque number if you've got it, date. And then we choose to bank it, and this will appear as a negative on your bank account because the cheque has bounced. We've already processed it, so we assume that money has gone in. So now we've got to process a negative that goes on the account properly. So if you have a cheque bounced on you, it's in receipts returned. It's a receipt you had, but it's been returned by the bank. If, on the other hand, you have a cheque returned to you that you wrote in the first place, so maybe the amount was wrong or the payee name was wrong, that doesn't go under return cheques, because return cheques is a subsection of receipt, money you received. So if you've written a cheque for whatever reason has been returned to you, place it when originally was payments. And I guess that's the kind of general rule here. When we're doing these unusual transactions, we go back to where we originally did the transaction in order to do the contra entry. So the scenario is we wrote a cheque, it was for the wrong payee. We go back to payments, but this time we can use the option here to cancel a payment. So even if you're just amending a cheque, whatever it might be, this is the option that cancels the cheque you've previously written so that you can then process a new one. So we wrote a cheque for the gardening club from school fund. The cheque number was, 1254. It was for £100. And under notes, I might say wrong payee. We're in cancel payments, so it's going to cancel the £100 cheque that I've previously written. It will conjure it off completely, and I can then re-enter the correct cheque. Gives us a little printout. So this is the way that we cancel off cheques if they are not going to go through. It's actually the same place that we use if you're going to write off an old cheque. So you wrote cheques for refunds, let's say 8 months ago, and the parents just aren't going to bother to take them to the bank. They're only for £3 each, and you make the decision just to write them off. This is the same place we go, into cancel payments. Anything that you've written out as a cheque or you've paid out in cash, but for some reason it's not going to happen, we use the cancel option. So bounce cheques or cancelled cheques, we do them in different ways depending on how they originated on the system. Another unusual thing we don't do too often is giving refunds. So again, because people have paid and we processed it through the receipts area, is also where we process the refund itself. So transaction entry, receipts and refunds. People often get this the wrong way around and they think that it goes in the payment section because it is a payment going out. But strictly speaking, from an accounting point of view, a refund is not the same as a payment. A payment is expenditure, whereas a refund is a cancellation of income. And that's why we do it through receipts and refunds. So just as before, if we're refunding somebody, we call up the account. If it's a pupil account, then a list of children would appear. If it's not, then we just get the amount box, how much we're refunding someone, our cheque number, the date. It says refund cheque in the notes, and we might say to Miss Smith, cancelled club, I don't know, something to that effect. And so someone has previously paid this money, we therefore go to receipts and refunds to give them the money back. And we can then bank that from the appropriate bank account. And we get a printout as usual. So that's giving a refund. And what about if we get a refund? So we've made a payment for some books, but one of them or two of them were damaged, and the company gives us a refund. Well, strictly speaking, that should go through payments and cancel payments. So if they give us £20 back, then we can put it in as a cancellation of part of the payment. Now the reality is sometimes if you receive a refund cheque, you need to include it into a banking, and so most people will therefore simply add it to their banking screen under cash or cheques. Ideally, a refund should be a reduction in expenditure rather than an increase in income. But I would say from a realistic point of view, as long as it's not hundreds of thousands of pounds, you're probably going to be okay doing it as a banking. If, on the other hand, they simply give you a credit note or something that you can use on your next payment, then probably cancel payment is the right place to do it. Last couple of things on unusual transaction. The last thing really is we've looked at lots of individual bits and pieces there. What about if the transaction is that you've done a banking, be that manual or coming in from an online payment system, you press the bank it button, everything's gone to the bank, but actually there's a query. Actually, the money that you have banked is not the same as the bank believe that you've received. So if you need to make an adjustment to a banking that's already been and gone on the system, this is how we do it. I would first of all take a look at what I've entered, just so I'm sure of what we need to correct. Here in Receipts and Banking, on the right hand side of the screen, there's a paying in archive. It shows me all of the paying ins this financial year. Perhaps the one at the top, the £1,200, is the one that someone is querying or the bank is querying. So let's click on it and do a print preview just to remind ourselves what the transactions are, what the figures are. And it may well be, let's say, that we've got a difference on cash. So we thought there was £560 cash returned, but actually the bank reckon there's 550. So the first thing is to ascertain which short code the difference is on. If you're really not sure, sometimes you'd have to guess, I guess, wouldn't you? Because a lot of these are cash, so it's hard to know if there's £10 different, which one was actually incorrect. Maybe it was the tuck shop, maybe it was the quiz night. We have to pick one of them to either lose or gain an extra £10. Once we've ascertained that then from the printout, we need to use the banking screen to put the entry right. So if we're going to go for, do you know, I forgot what they actually all were. Let me just quickly look there again. Let's go for sixth form. Let's say that's where our difference of £10 has appeared. So we choose the short code in question, which I think was called school sixth form. There he is. And if we've put in £10 more than the bank say there is, we'll need to put in minus 10. If we've got less than the bank say, obviously we put positive 10. So whatever the difference is, you put as a minus or a plus, is perfectly fine to bank a negative amount. Under the notes we'll say banking difference. And then we click on bank it. We put the same paying in slip number as the original, same date as the original, say yes, and that will now put a deduction or an addition on, so that when you come to reconciliation, your paying in slip number is showing the right amount. So that's a few unusual transaction types and how to process them. Another unusual transaction type that we don't do that often is moving money around internally. So section 3 in your notes. So moving money internally is called journaling or virement or transferring. It doesn't affect your overall figures, it just changes the internal allocation. There are loads of reasons why you might be doing this journaling. It could be that you're just topping up accounts using money in other ones. It could be that you've paid for reprographics from one short code, but you now need to share it out between various departments. Could be all sorts of reasons why you are moving money internally. Now, there are different ways that we do it, but there's an option called transfers. And transfers has a series of sub-options. So bank transfers is exactly that, when you need to move money between bank accounts if you have multiple bank accounts, and that includes if you want to put money into a petty cash tin. So petty cash or unbanked cash is treated as a kind of dummy bank account. So bank transfers moves money between real bank accounts, or it moves money into a cash tin, and it's also where, if you do have an online payment system, you can record the fact that ParentPay or whoever have settled a lump of money with you. Short code transfers is where we move money from one short code to another, but this is specifically income that we move, or final balances. This is not a way of moving expenditure. So if we've got the gardening club and it's got a bit of money and we'd like to actually give that money to, I'm not sure what we're going to give it to, gardening club, who do you fancy? I'm going to say we're going to give it to the kitchen fund for some or other reason, and then we'll just put something like transfer of funds, or we might put top up account, whatever we fancy, and however much money we want to move from one account to another. It doesn't change any of our overall figures, it just moves the allocation around internally. So you do this for balances, for top-ups, for money that's been posted to one account that should have gone to another. Now with student transfers, it's very much the same, except we pick a student and a trip, and we move the money that that person has paid from one account into another account. It's no new money going into the bank, it's just an internal allocation. So this transaction entry transfers option is where we move money between bank accounts, where we move money between students, where we move income from one short code into another short code. If it's payments, unfortunately, that doesn't do the business for us. If we need to move a payment from one account to another, we go back to transaction entry payments, and we do it literally as a straightforward in and out. So I'd like to move the money I paid on check 200 out of events and into business. And it literally is out of one is using a minus sign, and into another one is using the plus sign. And as long as we end up with a balance of 0, so the ins equal the outs, we're all happy. So this is how we move expenditure or a payment from one account to another. If you want to put something in the notes, such as, transfer cost or anything else, you can do so, whatever makes it obvious for you as to what we're doing. So if it's payments, it's expenditure, we need to use the payment screen. And if we want to take 200 out of the events fund but split it between a number of different accounts, that's absolutely fine too, as long as the ins equal the outs. So we've got minus 200 on the top line, then a series of pluses. As long as they end up at 0, then we've got a balanced journal and we're happy. So that's how we move expenditure. So transfers is normally the one that we use, unless it's expenditure that we're trying to move, in which case we have to do it on payments. Okay, let's just sit on data entry, transaction entry for a moment. I just want to talk through a few little tips that are helpful here. When we're entering on any of our screens, I'm sure you know that when you've got entries still on screen, you can go back and tweak them before you press the bank it button. So if this figure is wrong, I simply click on the figure and I type in the correct figure, tab off, and it's changed. If my date is wrong, I simply overtype my adjustment, add any text I want to. The only thing you can't change on any of these screens is the short code and full name. So if we've picked a events, but actually that's the wrong account completely, we can't now change that. All we can do is delete the line. We do so just as you would in Excel. You click on the grey box on the left-hand side of the line goes green. You press delete on your keyboard and say yes, and the line's completely gone. So if it's anything other than the code you've used, you can overtype it. If it's the account itself, you have to delete the line and then you have to re-enter the information. Another little thing that's quite handy is if you're doing a whole series of things, maybe you're doing a whole load of payments for something to someone. So it might be they're all the same check number because they're going to the capitation account in your school. And so I'll just add school as a supply. You don't have to do that, it's just I want to show the option. So we might be adding a whole load of bits and pieces into one big check that we're writing to the main school capitation account. They're all the same date, and actually they all want to say transfer to capitation account. So to make this a bit easier to do, we choose whatever account it is first, but then I'm going to use the F6 function key. It's above the number 6 on your keyboard. And if I want to copy exactly what is in the field above me, I just press F6. So can you see that and it works for everything except the supplier, which I'm going to have to add each time. Let's go. Begin. F6, same amount, same date, same notes, and then I just go down to whatever my next account is, tab across, use F6, F6, I'm going to have to pick school because it's the only thing that it doesn't do, but then I can do F6, 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 so F6 copies whatever is in the field or the box above where you currently are, and there are times when that's really super useful and makes everything a lot quicker. There's no overtyping or retyping. One last thing I just want to say about data entry is picking a shortcode. So it may be that you're a mouse person and you're perfectly happy to click and drag the mouse to find the shortcode of your choice. You're happy to click from box to box to box, using your keyboard only when needed. Click, click, click. If you're less of a clicker, there are ways that you can use do the data selection without having to keep going back to the mouse. So one of these is that you can just type in the beginning bit of your shortcode, and when you type in a little bit of it, it will always come up with the next bit of the shortcode. That might be handy. Or, again, if you don't want to be clicking your mouse particularly, when you're on this box, you can just use the Alt key, which is to the left of your keyboard, and press the down arrow, and it does the equivalent of using your mouse. Then you can press any letter and use your arrow keys to go to the one in question. So it's entirely up to you. Some people are much more keyboard orientated, so I use the keyboard perhaps more than I use a mouse, and therefore it makes sense to me. And I'm going from box to box using the tab key, which is on the left hand side of your keyboard, which again I find quicker than using the mouse to click. But it's up to you. It's just to mention that those are some options for data entry. Okay, let's move on to section 5. Just wanted to talk about bank reconciliation for a second. Transaction entry bank statement, where we tie up PFM to our bank account using a printed bank statement or electronic bank statement. You'll know, of course, that you check the statement opening balance to make sure it equals your bank account, and then you simply tick items on screen that appear on your paper statement. I would always work from the paper statement. Just a few tips then. The first thing is that as you make every single tick, the statement closing balance changes, and most banks have a balance, an ongoing balance as you run through your bank reconciliation. So if you've got a lot to reconcile, I'd say keep a really close eye on that so you can notice if at any point things go awry. You can also, rather than just leaving this humongous list that you're constantly going up and down and can't find what you want, you can change the way it displays. So for example, if you just were looking for £12.50 and you can't find it, I would click on this heading that says the word receipt, and it puts all of your figures into numeric order, and then you can see exactly where that figure is or if it's not on there. So that's to click on the receipts button. If you still can't find something, or you can't find something that way, there is a find box at the bottom left. And so for example, you can type in a paying in slip number or a check number. And when you press enter, it just shows that single entry. You can tick it and then go for show all. Or if you don't want to type in a check number or anything else, then you might choose to type in a person's name. And so I might type in Amy, enter, and it will show me anything that's got the word Amy, or it could be any other supplier name in the narrative. So if you're struggling to find things, there are easier ways to list the data, especially when you're doing a lot of historic stuff and have hundreds and hundreds of entries. If any of you have online payment systems, you'll know that that can be super long-winded to reconcile because we've got potentially hundreds of individual payments from parents and we're trying to tie it up to a single figure. Now, I can't go through all the systems here, but please do bear in mind they've got the options at the bottom here that will subtotal for you on a daily, half-monthly, weekly basis, or for parent mail batch basis. And it just gives you in the middle of the page the summary figures that you're trying to tie back to reconcile. And then we simply use the F1 function key in order to auto reconcile things. If you use what am I thinking? If you use school comms, the Read Gateway will actually do the reconciliation for you. So if you are on school comms and finding reconciliation hard work, do let me know and I can pop you the notes over, and that does it automatically. Very, very straightforward. If you need to make a very small adjustment, so you've got a paying in somewhere of a whole load of cash and it came out to be 12p difference, then you can simply use this adjust button. It's just as we did before through direct receipts. It allows you to make small adjustments by putting in a small receipt or payment and some kind of information in the details box. And if you have made a complete mess of a reconciliation and you're all over the place with it, there is an option here where we click on print reconciled, pick a statement of your choice, and you can simply unreconcile it. It will bring all the transactions back onto the page, adjust all the figures accordingly, and allow you to have another go at reconciliation. So if you've accidentally pressed commit changes or you thought it was right but now realise it wasn't, by far the easiest thing is to unreconcile a statement and have another go at it. Moving on to section 6 then, I just want to talk about screen inquiries and reports. You'll know that this is summary information on all of the accounts on the system. Every single one, when you click on it, comes on screen first, and then you can choose to either print it or stick it into an Excel spreadsheet. And most of you will be familiar with things such as the income and expenditure and the summary balance sheet, but let's talk through a few of the others. So I'm in screen inquiries and I'm in financial reports. Income and expenditure then, every single account, opening balance, money in, money out, closing balance with a total at the bottom, and summary balance sheet, just how much you've got in each of your bank accounts. Let's talk about some that people often miss though that can be handy. Here on the financial reports, bottom left-hand corner, there's an account balance. It's a very simple report that just tells you how much is in each of your different accounts. So sometimes that's all people need. We've already talked about the summary account report, which is the one by cost code, dependent on you allocating all of your individual accounts into a group heading. The other one that I think is useful here is the INE, including a from date. So every report we run goes back to the start of this financial year and takes you up to the current date. Now you could change that period from date, but actually the system ignores you. It just always go back to day one of this financial year, unless we use this including a from date. So using this, we can change the date to anything we want it to be. We can run the INE including a from date, and what it does is the income and expenditure now is just from that point onwards. It rolls everything else into the opening balance figure. So I think that's a really handy report if you want something done monthly or termly, rather than always going back to the start of the financial year. Other ones I think are of note are transaction lists. This is an area, first of all, where you can do a free text search. So you can type for anything, a word, a check number, a person, anything at all. We click on undated search and it brings up every instance of that word Amy. So if you've mislaid a paying in, someone reckons they've written a check, you can't find it, whatever it might be, use the free text box as a searcher. The other one down here is individual, which is where you can pick any student of your choice and find, first of all, everything they've paid. Oh, that's unlucky. Everything they've paid for any trip at all. So it would list all of them. We've just got the one as it happens. So that's quite a nice statement for the parent. But also, the second button down, everything they owe any money for. So again, a really nice statement for a parent to use that amount owing box. Still in screen inquiries, reports by account, you will have seen, I'm sure, the summary statement button. Summary statement top left is all the money in, all the money out, and what you've got left in this particular account. Other ones that are handy in there, a detailed list gives, in addition to their basic information, their special needs status, whether they've got free school meals, date of birth and ethnicity, used by certain schools for certain things. Pupil reports by account, again, if you do any processing of reports by individual, you possibly use this. The top half of this is all about contact information about the children. Let's find one of our T's. On Taz will do. So contact list, who's going, medical details, phone numbers, that sort of thing. Bottom half is all about how much money anybody owes. A couple of handy ones it's worth being aware of. The medical report gives you a full information as brought in from your pupil record system. So if you're going on a trip and you want the medical information for all the children who are going. And then there's also non-attendees for the year group is quite a handy one. So it's everyone who, if any of these were a whole year group, it would tell you anyone not going. So it's a nice little summary report of everybody who's going to be left in school. Then you've got generally money, and the only one I wanted to point out there was the debtors button over on the right, which not only can show you debtors for just one account, but as you can see, it will show us a single report by short code or by, let's go for the single summary report. Oh no, that's too much. I'm going to go for the next one down. So the middle button tells us for each short code who still owes what money, and it's got a contact number so you could maybe chase those up. Lots of different reports, all worth a look, and you can click any one of them. They don't do anything, they just pop up on the screen. You then choose if you want to print or otherwise. Very last thing I just want to talk about then on the system is security. Security really on PFM has two elements. One is logging in with passwords, and 2 is making sure that you've got secure backups. If you do want to use passwords, it's very simple. You go to the file, choose security, and you choose add user. The first person you use has to be a person who can do everything. So whoever that might be, I'll just say manager. We have to leave it on the option that this person has full access to everything. I'll just put in a password. I've just put ABC. You can put anything you want. And it says you put manager on, anybody else you would like. So now you can put on, if you wish, everyone who needs to use PFM. Do they all need full access, or are some of them just needing to look? So we might put the head on, who can only view. I'll put a password of head, click on save, add another, and as you can see then there are different options. So bottom left hand corner tells me who I'm logged on as the moment. At the moment I'm on as the head, who can only view things, so I want to go back to me. So I use switch user, there we go, take me okay. I'll go for manager, ABC I think it was, perfect. So I'm back to me and I can do everything, but I can set people up to do anything. So passwords there if you want them to. Very last thing then is making sure that you're getting backups, your data is secure. If you go to file and where am I, it tells you where PFM is installed, and as long as it doesn't say C, then it will mean it's on your network, on your server, and hopefully your network manager is therefore in charge of backing it up. If it does say C, it means it's only on your personal computer, so you have to be responsible for backups. We do backups in period end. Period end, and the first tab is called archive. And here in the middle of the screen, we can type in a name for our backup. Now, if it was only on my personal computer, I would be doing that at least weekly. So the end of the week might be the 8th of the 11th. I'd put that in as a date and I'd click on create backup. If you are on a server and it's being done, you're pretty sure it's being done on a daily basis, I would still do one at the end of each month, just so that you've got regular backups that you could go back to if you really needed to. But really the only time it becomes very crucial on a network is if you come to a period end, particularly a year end, you definitely need to take a copy. These backups, you can have hundreds of them, and in actual fact, if we click on Archives and View Backup, you'll see that there's many of them. I've got lots going back a long way, but in addition to the one I've taken manually, there are 5 that get automatically taken. They're called safety nets. And they're there so that if I happen to come in one morning and do something completely ridiculous, the system has actually got a copy of the data when I started that morning. And so if you're ever in a situation where you've just done something, you've deleted a whole lot of stuff you shouldn't have, you've done a bank rec which is rubbish, we can talk you through coming back to the safety net you took first thing in the morning and wiping any of that stuff off. And obviously the point of these backups is to give you some security so your data is always secure and accurate. So take backups if you wish to in period end and archives, and then if you need to ever get back to them, it's always worth a call to us to be sure, but we can talk you through going back to a safety net and restoring to a point before you did whatever you didn't mean to do. That brings us to the end of our session. As I said, we've got there's a huge amount there, so I apologise I'm 3 minutes over. A lot that we need to work through there. If there's any queries on any of it, please do feel free to give me a call, and hopefully you've got a nice appreciation of some of the other things on PFM. Thanks for coming. See you another time. Bye bye.